$12.6 billion can get a massive tax cut. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 3 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the Budget Act, adopted in 1974, requires that the House complete work on its budget for the next fiscal year by April 15th. That's 172 days ago. Yet we now have a budget resolution on the floor, already into the fiscal year for which the budget supposedly is planned. Some may ask, why? The answer is a simple one. This is, first of all, not a realistic budget, which could or should stand as a budget resolution. No, this budget is about putting our country, it is not about putting our country on a sustainable fiscal path. And this is indisputable, it is not a budget to inform the appropriators of budget priorities and constraints. No, the Appropriations Committee will not be informed. Why? Because we've already passed the appropriation bills. This budget doesn't have anything to do with the bills. They're passed. They're gone. They're in the Senate. This is merely a vehicle for achieving partisan tax reform of the kind that President Trump and Republican leaders in Congress outlined last week. Despite what this sham of a budget pretends, their plan is to push through tax changes that massively increase deficits. I call it the granddaddy of all debt increases, while shifting even more wealth from middle class and working families to people like Donald Trump. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, 80% of the tax cuts in this proposal would go only to those who make over $900,000 a year. Hear me. The tax cuts mainly go to those making in this nation over $900,000 per year. Despite promises from President Trump and Republicans here in the House, their plan actually raises taxes. Hear me, while cutting taxes on those over $900,000, it actually raises taxes on 1 in 3 middle-class families who earn between $50,000 and $150,000. Even though Republicans continue to assert the discredited supply-side mantra that tax cuts pay for themselves, no responsible economist believes that. Not one. Responsible is the operative word. The Tax Policy Center's analysis found that their tax cuts would add
An additional 1 minute is yielded.
Tax cuts would add $2.4 trillion to deficits over the next 10 years. The previous speaker said this balances in 9 years. That's Alice in Wonderland balance. It will never happen. I've been here for 36. I've heard those comments all the time. It never happened. But it's even worse, Mr. Speaker. The budget resolution also proposes to disinvest in job creation, pretends Republicans were able to repeal the Affordable Care Act. It hasn't been repealed, yet they pretend it's been repealed to kick 23 million off their coverage and make those with pre-existing conditions uninsurable. It guts Medicaid and would end Medicare guarantee. Furthermore, it would severely cut programs that reduce poverty and provide the kind of job training proven to get more people back into the workforce. This resolution is a grab bag of all the worst Republican policies. Partisan tax cuts for the wealthy that leave the middle class behind, the cruelty of Trump care. I thank the gentleman.
Time is yielded.
Partisan tax cuts for the wealthy that leave the middle class behind, the cruelty of Trump care, and draconian reductions in domestic investment. The product is just as bad as the sum of its parts. Indeed, it's worse. Instead, we ought to be working together to enact bipartisan tax reform that is fiscally responsible and focused on the middle class. I urge my colleagues to defeat this resolution, and I ask Republicans who believe that tax reform must be permanent and therefore bipartisan to join us in doing so. The debt under Ronald Reagan, only one person can stop spending. That's the President of the United States. He can veto spending bills. The debt under Ronald Reagan increased 189%. Under Bush 1 and 55%. He had 4 years. Under Clinton, 37%. Under Bush 2, 86%. And under Obama, who with the deepest recession of our lifetimes, 87%. Ladies and gentlemen, a budget is supposed to inform the Appropriations Committee of how it ought to proceed. This budget comes after the fact and is only for tax cuts for the wealthy, and I yield back the balance.